My earliest memories are filled with the warmth of my dad's smile and the comfort of our small rented apartment. Until I was 13, my life was ordinary in the best possible way. Dad was the kind of father who made everything an adventure. Even though we lived in a modest apartment, he turned our tiny balcony into a fairy garden and our living room into a fort during rainy weekends. Mom was different, more reserved, always dreaming of a bigger house and a grander life. But back then, their differences seemed to balance each other out perfectly. "Amelia, sweetie, would you like to spend the weekend at Grandpa's?" Mom would often ask, and I'd jump at the chance. Not because I didn't want to be home, but because Grandpa's house was like a second home to me. It was this beautiful two-story Victorian with creaking wooden floors and endless corners to explore. "Your mother needs her alone time with your father," Grandpa would explain with a knowing smile when I'd arrive at his doorstep, "and I need my time with my favorite granddaughter." I was a perceptive child, more than the adults around me realized. I understood that Mom sometimes needed space, that she and Dad had their own relationship to nurture. It didn't hurt me. If anything, it made me feel mature. Plus, those weekends with Grandpa were precious. He'd tell me stories about Dad's childhood, teach me about managing money — he was a retired bank manager — and make the best pancakes in the world. "You know, Amelia," he told me once while we were having breakfast on his porch, "your mother dreams of a house like this, but you know what's more important than a big house? A home filled with love." I nodded, understanding even at that young age. Our apartment might have been small, but it was filled with love. Dad would come home from his job at the insurance company, swing me around in his arms, and pepper Mom with kisses until she laughed in spite of herself. Those moments made our tiny space feel infinite. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. I was 13 when Dad started losing weight rapidly. At first, he joked about it, saying he was finally getting in shape. But his eyes told a different story. The doctor's visits became more frequent, and Mom's face grew increasingly worried. "It's just a phase," Dad would say, ruffling my hair weakly. "I'll be back to my old self in no time." But he wasn't. The disease, aggressive pancreatic cancer, consumed him like wildfire. Within months, my strong, vibrant father became a shadow of himself. I watched helplessly as Mom tried to hold everything together, but I could see her crumbling inside. The last conversation I had with Dad is forever etched in my memory. He was lying in his hospital bed, his hand barely strong enough to hold mine. "Take care of your mom for me, princess," he whispered, "and let Grandpa guide you. He's wiser than all of us combined." The year after Dad's death felt like living in a fog. Mom spiraled into such deep depression that she could barely look at me. I guess I reminded her too much of him. Thank goodness for Grandpa. He became my rock, my safe harbor in the storm that our lives had become. Living in Grandpa's house wasn't just a temporary solution anymore. It became my new normal. Every morning I'd wake up in what used to be Dad's old room, surrounded by his childhood photos and trophies. Grandpa made sure I kept up with school, helped me with homework, and tried his best to fill the void both my parents had left. One through death, the other through grief. Mom would call occasionally, but her voice always seemed distant, detached. Her visits were even rarer. Quick stops where she'd barely meet my eyes before rushing off again. I learned to stop expecting more. Then, exactly 1 year and 2 months after Dad's death, everything changed. Mom showed up at Grandpa's door one sunny Saturday morning, and I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the grieving widow in black, replaced by someone wearing a bright yellow dress and sporting a new haircut. Her face was glowing with an unfamiliar happiness. "Amelia, sweetie, pack your things. You're coming home," she announced, bouncing on her heels like a teenager. I looked at Grandpa, confused. He seemed just as surprised as I was. The drive back to our apartment was filled with Mom's cheerful chatter about everything and nothing. It was like sitting next to a stranger who happened to look like my mother. But the real shock came when we walked through our apartment door. There, in our small living room, stood a tall man and a girl who looked about 3 years younger than me. They both smiled awkwardly as Mom practically danced to their side. "Amelia, meet Robert and his daughter Emma. Robert is my fiancé, and Emma will be your new sister," We're getting married soon. Mom beamed, clutching Robert's arm. The room started spinning. What? When did this happen? Oh, we've been dating for a while now. Mom waved her hand dismissively. I didn't tell anyone about the relationship. You know how people can get jealous and judgmental. It was better this way. I stumbled to my old room, barely registering that it had been redecorated. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called Grandpa. He answered on the first ring. Mom has a fiancé, I whispered into the phone. She's getting married and didn't tell anyone. There's a man here, and his daughter. Grandpa arrived within 20 minutes. I could hear the conversation from my room as he confronted Mom. Sarah, how could you do this without telling anyone? Without telling your own daughter? Dad, I'm happy. For the first time in forever. Mom's voice was defensive. I've decided to start fresh, to live again. James would want that. He wouldn't want me to waste away in depression forever. There was a long pause before Grandpa spoke again, his voice heavy with resignation. I hope you'll be happy, Sarah. Just don't forget you have a daughter who needs you too. The 3 months before the wedding were like living in some twisted alternate reality. Our small apartment felt even more cramped with 4 people instead of 2. But that wasn't the worst part. What really got to me was watching Emma, my soon-to-be stepsister, wrap my mother around her finger. Mom, can you help me with my hair? Emma would say, and my mother would drop everything, including our conversation, to assist her. The way she said Mom made my skin crawl, especially since she'd only known my mother for a few months. Mom seemed blind to everything except Emma. When Emma mentioned she loved ballet, Mom immediately signed her up for private lessons, something I'd begged for years ago, but was told we couldn't afford. When Emma complained about her old phone being too slow, Mom bought her the latest iPhone model. When Emma wanted to redecorate her side of the bedroom we now shared, Mom took her shopping and spent hundreds of dollars on new bedding, curtains, and decorations. Your sister needs to feel welcome here, Mom would say whenever I tried to point out the disparity in treatment. Stepsister, I'd correct her, and I need to feel welcome too. She'd just shake her head and walk away. The wedding day itself was a modest affair at a local venue, but Mom glowed with happiness. I stood there in my bridesmaid dress, watching as she fussed over Emma's hair and makeup, barely sparing me a glance. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Mom kept Emma close, holding her hand, introducing her to everyone as my beautiful daughter. I might as well have been a waitress for all the attention I received. Grandpa gave them a check for $5,000 as a wedding gift, a generous amount by any standard. But I overheard Mom's reaction when she cornered him by the restrooms. Really, Dad? A check? She hissed, her face flushed from champagne and anger. I was counting on you giving us your house. We're a proper family now. We need the space. That apartment is too small for 4 people. Grandpa remained calm, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Sarah, you're rushing everything. First the sudden engagement, now this. That house isn't just property to be handed over on a whim. Besides, it's where Amelia spends half her time now. Oh, so that's it. You're playing favorites now. No, I'm being practical, and maybe you should be too. I slipped away before they could notice me, but the conversation haunted me. My mother had changed so much that I barely recognized her anymore. She'd created this new perfect family in her mind, with Emma as the star child and Robert as the ideal husband. There didn't seem to be any room left for me. So I did what any unwanted person would do. I spent more and more time at Grandpa's house. At least there, I didn't have to pretend to be happy about being replaced. 4 years passed. I was about to graduate from high school. Living in that apartment had become a master class in avoiding conflict. I'd learned to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible, to spend most of my time either in my room or at Grandpa's. One evening, during our weekly family dinner, another exercise in pretending we were one big happy family, I decided to share my plans for the future. I've been accepted to State University, I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. I want to study finance and business management. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom put down her fork, exchanged a look with Robert, and cleared her throat. Actually, Amelia, I think it would be better if you started working after graduation. College isn't necessary for everyone. I stared at her, bewildered. What are you talking about? Dad set up a college fund for me before he died. He always wanted me to get a higher education. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. About that fund. Robert and I have been talking, and we think it would be better to save that money for Emma's education. She's incredibly talented, top of her class and everything. She'll need a good university education to reach her full potential. Robert nodded sagely. Emma has shown remarkable aptitude in her studies. It would be the right thing to do, Amelia. You could work for a few years, save up, and then go to college if you still want to. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The college fund, the last gift my father had arranged for me. They wanted to take that too. That money is mine, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Dad left it specifically for my education. You can't just give it to Emma. Don't be selfish, Amelia. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Emma is your sister. Stepsister. I stood up so quickly my chair fell backward. And that money is the last thing I have from Dad. You've given her everything else. My room, your attention, your love. But you can't have this. I won't let you take it. How dare you? Mom was crying now, but I could see the manipulation in her tears. After everything we've done for you, Emma needs. What about what I need? What about what Dad wanted for me? The argument ended with doors slamming, mostly Mom's, as she wailed about my selfishness. After that night, the apartment became even more hostile. No one spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. Emma would smirk whenever she passed me in the hallway, and Robert wouldn't even look in my direction. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised to find only Grandpa in the audience. He cheered loud enough for 4 people when they called my name, and his proud smile meant more to me than anything my new family could have offered. That evening, I packed everything I owned into 3 cardboard boxes and my old suitcase. Grandpa helped me load them into his car. Your room is always ready for you, sweetheart, he said, as we drove away from the apartment. Always has been, always will be. I didn't look back as we left. There was nothing there for me anymore. College life became my escape. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my father and Grandpa proud. The business and finance courses fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in ways that would have made Dad smile. Every evening I'd call Grandpa to share what I'd learned. Tell me again about derivatives, he'd say, even though he knew more about finance than my professors. I love hearing you explain it. But as my college years progressed, I noticed changes in Grandpa's voice during our calls. He got tired more easily, and his usual sharp wit sometimes seemed dull. During my visits home, I caught him wincing when he stood up or rubbing his chest when he thought I wasn't looking. It's just age catching up with me, he'd say whenever I asked about his health. Nothing to worry about, sweetheart. But I did worry. I started calling him twice a day instead of once, and I'd drive home every weekend I could, not just on holidays. We'd sit in his kitchen, drinking tea, and talking about everything and nothing, just like we used to. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with such intense love that it made my throat tight. It was the middle of my final semester when Mom called. I almost didn't answer. It was the first time she'd called in 4 years, but something made me pick up. Grandpa died last night, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. The funeral is on Thursday at 2 p.m., Hartford Funeral Home. The phone slipped from my hand. I don't remember much of what happened next, just that my roommate found me curled up on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Thursday came too quickly, and not quickly enough. The funeral home was exactly the kind of place Grandpa would have chosen. Understated, but elegant, with large windows letting in natural light. I arrived early, my black dress feeling too tight, my skin too sensitive. Everything felt wrong because Grandpa wasn't there to make it right. I expected to see Mom and her family, but they weren't there. Instead, Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's friend from his banking days, was organizing everything. They're running a bit late, he said when I asked. Your mother called to say they'd be delayed." The service was beautiful, filled with people from Grandpa's life sharing stories about his kindness, his integrity, his humor. I sat in the front row, alone with my grief, until halfway through the service when I heard the back door open. Mom swept in with Robert and Emma, all in perfectly coordinated black outfits. They took seats in the far back, and Mom didn't even glance in my direction. Her face was set in a mask of appropriate grief, but her eyes were already darting around the room, assessing, calculating. I turned back to face the front, my tears now burning with both grief and anger. Even here, even now, she couldn't acknowledge me, couldn't put aside her pettiness for one day to mourn her own father. After the funeral service, I drove to Grandpa's house, my home for the past 4 years, only to stop short at the sight that greeted me. There, scattered across the front lawn like worthless debris, were garbage bags filled with my belongings. My clothes, my books, my photo albums. Everything from my room had been unceremoniously thrown out. Some bags had split open, spilling my life across the grass. With trembling hands, I tried my key in the front door. It wouldn't turn. The lock had been changed. I was still standing there, key uselessly in hand, when the door swung open. Mom stood in the doorway, wearing the same black dress from the funeral, but now with an expression of triumph rather than grief. "Oh, good, you're here to collect your things," she said, as if she was doing me a favor. "This is my house now. Dad's finally gone, and as his only child, I'm the rightful heir. I've already had the locks changed. We're moving in tonight." I stared at her, unable to process the cruelty of it all. "You couldn't even wait until after the funeral? These are my things, my home." "No, this is my home now," she cut me off sharply. "And you better take your stuff quickly, or it's going in the dumpster. I need to clear the space for Emma's things." She smiled coldly. "She's getting your old room, by the way. She's always wanted a bigger bedroom." I felt numb as I gathered my belongings, stuffing everything back into the torn bags, trying to collect the scattered photos of Dad and Grandpa from where they'd fallen in the grass. My mother stood in the doorway the entire time, watching me like a security guard, making sure I didn't try to steal anything. The drive back to my college dorm was a blur of tears and disbelief. My roommate helped me carry everything up, not asking questions when she saw my state. A week later, I received a call from a law firm. "Miss Johnson, this is Mr. Anderson from Anderson and Partners Law Firm. I'm your grandfather's notary. We need you to come in for the reading of his will. Would Thursday at 10 a.m. work for you?" I agreed, though I couldn't see the point. Mom had made it clear she was the heir to everything. When I arrived at the notary's office that Thursday, Mom, Robert, and Emma were already there, seated like royalty in the leather chairs. Emma was examining her manicure while Robert scrolled through his phone. Mom's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she asked loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear. "You're clearly not needed for this. We're handling family business." "Mr. Anderson adjusted his glasses and began reading from the document in front of him. "I, Richard James Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament," he started with the formal language. I saw Mom already smiling triumphantly. That smile froze when Mr. Anderson continued. "To my beloved granddaughter, Amelia Johnson, I leave my house at 1542 Oak Street, along with all its contents, and my entire savings account containing $775,000. The room went deadly silent for a moment. Then Mom's voice shattered it. "What? This can't be right." She snatched the document from Mr. Anderson's hands, her eyes scanning frantically. "Where's my part? I'm his daughter, Mr. Anderson calmly retrieved the will. "Mrs. Waters, your father's wishes are quite clear. He leaves everything to Miss Amelia Johnson. There is no provision for you in the will." "This is impossible." Mom's face had turned scarlet. "She manipulated him. She poisoned him against me. I'll sue. I'll contest this will." "The will is ironclad," Mr. Anderson stated firmly. "Your father had it properly witnessed and notarized 6 months ago. He was of completely sound mind, as attested by his doctor, Any attempt to contest it would be futile and expensive. Mom's strategy suddenly shifted. The rage in her eyes transformed into tears as she turned to me. "Amelia, sweetie, please," she pleaded, her voice honey-sweet now. "We've already given up our apartment. We moved everything out yesterday. We have nowhere to go. You can't just throw us out on the street. We're family." I stood up, holding the folder Mr. Anderson had just handed me. Inside were the deed to the house, ownership transfer documents, and all the legal paperwork confirming my ownership of the property. "Family?" I asked quietly. "Like how you threw my belongings onto the lawn before Grandpa was even in his grave? Like how you tried to steal my college fund? Like how you've treated me for the past 4 years?" "That was different. This is your problem, not mine." I cut her off, turning to leave. "I suggest you start looking for a new apartment." I drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house now, but I couldn't just go in. I pulled out my phone and called a locksmith, explaining the situation. When he arrived, I showed him my freshly notarized ownership documents. "I'm the legal owner of this house," I explained, showing him the paperwork. "I need you to open these locks and then change them to new ones. I want to be the only one with the keys." As the locksmith worked, I gathered up everything that belonged to Mom, Robert, and Emma. All the clothes they'd already unpacked, their toiletries from the bathrooms, Emma's posters she'd already stuck to my old bedroom wall. I loaded it all into garbage bags, just as they had done with my things. When the locksmith finished and handed me the new keys, I dragged all their bags onto the front porch and arranged them neatly. The symmetry of the situation wasn't lost on me. Their belongings now sat where mine had been just days ago. As the sun began to set, I heard the familiar sound of Mom's car pulling into the driveway. I watched through the living room window, Grandpa's favorite spot to read his morning paper, as the reactions played out exactly as I'd expected. "What is this?" Mom's shriek could be heard clearly through the closed windows. "Our things. All our things are outside." I opened the door but stood firmly in the doorway as they approached. Mom's face was red with fury. Robert looked like he'd swallowed something sour, and Emma was already crying theatrical tears. "How dare you!" Mom stormed up the porch steps. "We live here now. You can't do this to us." "Actually, I can. This is my house now, legally and rightfully. You need to take your belongings and leave." "We have nowhere to go," Emma wailed. "You should have thought about that before giving up your apartment," I replied coolly. "Not my problem." Mom tried to push past me into the house, but I stood my ground. "Move, Amelia. This is ridiculous. This is my father's house." "No, it's my house now. And if you don't leave immediately with your things, I'm calling the police to report you for trespassing. After that, all these bags go straight to the dumpster." I pulled out my phone. "Your choice, Mom. Just like you gave me a choice about my things a few days ago. Remember?" The next few minutes were filled with cursing and threats as they gathered their bags. Mom alternated between crying and screaming about how unfair it all was, while Emma kept saying I'd regret this. Robert muttered under his breath about contesting the will. As they loaded the last bag into their car, Mom turned to me one final time. "You're no daughter of mine. Your father would be ashamed of you." I smiled sadly. "No, Mom. Dad would be proud that I finally stood up for myself. Goodbye." I watched them drive away, their car disappearing around the corner. That was 6 months ago. I'm in my final semester now, about to graduate with honors. The house is being rented to a lovely young family. Their monthly rent payments are helping me build my savings, just as Grandpa would have wanted. I found his letter in the study safe that first night after everyone left. "My dearest Amelia," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you've already dealt with your mother's reaction to my will. I'm sorry I had to put you through that, but I knew Sarah too well. I knew what she would try to do. You have your father's integrity and my business sense. Use them both wisely. The house is yours to do with as you please. Just promise me you'll keep the family photos in the attic. Some memories are worth keeping, even the painful ones." I kept that promise, along with the others I made to both him and Dad. I'm focusing on my future now, letting go of the past, but keeping the lessons it taught me. Sometimes family isn't who you're born to. Sometimes it's who believes in you, who protects you, who helps you grow. Mom, Robert, and Emma still live somewhere in the city. I hear they found a new apartment eventually. They've tried to contact me a few times, usually when they need something, but I don't respond. Some chapters of our lives are better left closed. Story 2. I don't want my partner to see this, so I'm creating a temporary account. Although I reported this somewhere, I figured this community could also be able to help. My partner is 30 years old, and we have been together for 2 years. I am a 28-year-old woman. I'll name him Jack for the purposes of this narrative, and we've been living together for 8 months. I found a message concealed in the back of the cupboard as I was tidying up our flat. I'll explain what was said in the message to Jack's future girlfriend below for context. Since Jack would never tidy this area, I assume you are reading this. I'm planning to end our relationship shortly, so I'm leaving this here. Additionally, I would want to alert you about him. He refuses to tidy. He refuses to listen. He'll make you feel like you're to blame for everything. You're not to blame. He simply lacks the capacity for responsibility. I'm going to leave him, and I advise you to follow suit. Warmest regards. After reading the message, Emily's name changed. I presented it to Jack so he could comment. She was untrustworthy and not in the appropriate state of mind, so he tore it up right away and instructed me to disregard it. He hadn't discovered it in the 5 years after their breakup, which I pointed out was a red flag because it implies he never cleaned there. He has been cleaning less and less since I moved here, I added. In response, he claimed that there had been no problem prior to the message and that his ex was still attempting to meddle and ruin his life. He thought I was giving in to her tactics. We continued to argue about it until I made the decision to stay the night at a friend's house. Jack has been a decent boyfriend thus far. He frequently tells me how much he loves me, sends me flowers and presents, and gets along well with my family. Although he is correct that the cleaning problem had not been brought up prior to the memo, I thought that we needed to have a serious discussion about it after reading it and seeing that he had been cleaning less and less over time. He later apologized via text message for making me feel as though I had to go. But he also said that it was unjust of me to put a note ahead of our 2-year relationship and to ignore him and our dogs. I am at a loss for what to think or do. I'm thinking about attempting to track down Emily because her true name is so unusual, and I think I might be able to find her. Jack, however, believes that I ought to return home and move on, claiming that his enthusiasm affects our future. Since everything Jack has said about Emily makes her seem manipulative and immature, I'm wondering whether I could be at fault. I don't know what to believe, though. Edit. I thought I'd add some details here because I realized I didn't adequately describe the cleaning scenario. We divided up the cleaning duties equally when we initially moved in together 8 months ago, but he's been doing less and less over time. Right now, I'd say it's around 70% myself and 30% him. Depending on the week, if he listens to me promptly, it can be 60-40. Previously, I didn't have to remind him to do things like take out the garbage or put his dishes in the sink. Until I take care of them, the dirty dishes will accumulate. Additionally, food has occasionally gone rotten on the platters. Since I don't enjoy conflict, I've just been requesting that he do better whenever it comes up. After giving the memo more thought, I concluded that we needed to have a thorough discussion about it. But instead of listening to what I perceived as legitimate worries, he just spoke about the fact that I was taking his ex's statement seriously when I brought up the message. According to him, I was letting the note confirm my assumptions, which prevented me from believing anything he said. To be clear, I haven't permanently left him. All of this occurred only yesterday, and I only stayed at my friend's place for 1 night, since I didn't believe our talk was progressing, and he wouldn't let me sleep until I consented to let go. I would want to receive criticism and advice prior to my return today. I truly appreciate all of the guidance in the comments. I'm on my way back to our house. I want to express regret for bringing up the note without taking into account his sentiments, and to admit that receiving a communication from an ex might be challenging. However, a lot of you are correct when you say that I've been overlooking the cleaning problems. Asking him to clean all the time is not something I want to do in a relationship. I'm starting to take the notes seriously after one commenter pointed out that he ought to have cleaned the shelves when he moved out of his ex's house and that it hasn't been touched in 5 years. I'm going to ask him to sit down with me and establish clear housekeeping standards and assign tasks, since I don't want to waste 2 years of our relationship. I will state unequivocally that I will not tolerate this. He will have to choose his own course of action. I'll do my best to update everyone. Once more, I sincerely appreciate your counsel. Update. I tried to have a calm conversation with Jack after I apologized for bringing up the message, as I had advised in my previous article. He refused to listen to anything further I had to say, perhaps seeing it as an admission of guilt. As several of you recommended, I had produced a list of particular occasions in which he failed to clean, but he said that I was utilizing lists in the same way that his manipulative ex does. Yes, it turns out that the crazy ex issue you all raised was real. He even made an attempt to prevent me from leaving the flat when I understood the talk was pointless. I knew it was finished at that point, so I immediately departed. I'm happy I had this wake-up call before the relationship progressed, even if it ended after 2 years. While Jack is away, I want to wait for things to calm down a little before asking my brother to accompany me to pick up my items. I think this will go well because he has a rigorous work schedule. I'm considering writing a message, although it will probably be lengthier and provide some guidance for the next person to discover it. If he hasn't learnt to clean, it will finally catch up with him since I'll conceal it in the same place. He only needs to clean. The fact that I didn't need to contact Emily was the biggest surprise of all. She made contact with me. Jack apparently called her on a friend's phone and aggressively accused her of continuing to wreck his life. He was the one with problems, not her, as evidenced by the fact that she blocked him, yet he was still able to recall her phone number. Emily wanted to check up on me after seeing me on social media. She was particularly worried that he would attempt to control me in the same manner that he controlled her. I expressed my gratitude to her for saving me time by leaving the message. We have scheduled a coffee date for Thursday afternoon. Again, I want to thank everyone for their suggestions, especially the guy who suggested the website Love is Respect. I completed the healthy relationship quiz after our talk, and the results weren't good. He was gradually luring me into an unhealthy relationship, and you all did a fantastic job of pointing it out. My buddy has volunteered to let me remain for the time being till I locate another place to call home. I'm in a somewhat secure position while I navigate this challenging split since I'm lucky to have emergency money and an excellent work. All I'm trying to do is concentrate on being thankful for it. One more update. I prefer to act swiftly, as my initial message made clear. Bringing up the message immediately was certainly a mistake, but taking care of matters this morning without delay was not. I was able to save my pets because of it. I want to start by answering comments that say, I broke up with someone over a note and housework after 2 years. No, I broke up with him because he would yell at me and tell me that I was the only one who was wrong when I attempted to find solutions for an unfair situation. The tipping point was when he yelled at me and physically stopped me from leaving the house. Nobody should remain with someone who handles disagreement in that way. It is unacceptable. The real update. Emily felt the post was fantastic when I emailed it to her last night. She inquired about my dogs, just like some of you, to put things in perspective. Jack and I bonded over our shared love of animals. At first, I believed he was a wonderful person because I assumed he could take care of me if he could take such meticulous care of his pet lizard. Likewise, I was mistaken. Before we met, he had purchased 1 lizard, and we both purchased 2 frogs. When I moved in, I also brought my pet snake. At first, I assumed he wouldn't hurt the frogs and the snake, so I waited until he had calmed down before returning for my belongings. However, Emily convinced me to change my mind. She was concerned about my dog's welfare and cautioned me that he may turn destructive when he was upset. I contacted the landlord to arrange a meeting for this morning as soon as I knew I couldn't wait. Emily and I spoke for a while on a video call last night. According to Emily, a lawyer in our state, landlords must permit a tenant to terminate a lease in cases of domestic abuse. She further clarified that he had abused me by yelling at me, controlling me, and preventing me from leaving. I find it difficult to accept that, but I gained a deeper understanding of it after taking the Love is Respect relationship quiz. Evidently, his persistent texting and authority over my attire and schedule are other indications of abuse. Emily offered to accompany my brother and me this morning so we could talk to the landlord. The landlord agreed to let me breach the contract as soon as he heard the word lawyer. However, even though I was departing 3 days early, I still owed money for the entire month of August. I thought that was fair. In order for me to pack my belongings, the landlord also messaged Jack to let him know that the flat would need to be unoccupied for emergency repairs during the day. In response, Jack said he would be at work until 6 o'clock. The flat was in utter disarray when I got there. I had packed some plates, but they were smashed and all over the floor. They ripped my garments and tossed them all over the room. It was terrible and distressing. He unlocked the cages for my snake and our frogs, but he left his lizard alone. Fortunately, my snake had gotten out, but the frogs were still securely in their cage. Because the shattered plates may have wounded her, this infuriated me the most. I consider myself quite fortunate that I was able to securely return her to her cage after discovering her hidden in a closet corner. As my brother takes me to my friend's place, I've packed everything I own and am writing this. Emily informed me that, in fact, she left 3 notes. 1 in the toaster's crumb catcher, 1 in the cupboard, and 1 beneath the vacuum. We made sure the notes were still there while we were there. It appears that Jack cleaned the crumb collector at least once in the previous 5 years, but the one that was vacuumed was still there. I was surprised since he never mentioned discovering a message in any of our chats. Emily and I changed the vacuum note in the cabinet and left the old one in place. I left a brochure on good and harmful relationships together with a QR code for the quiz that helped me understand the truth, because I didn't feel comfortable writing my name on a fresh letter. Emily said that even after moving, Jack is unlikely to discover the notes again if he hasn't found them in the previous 5 years. I concur, particularly considering that he discovered one, but neglected to clean the rest of the flat to look for more. I simply don't understand Jack anymore. I realized that I never truly knew who he was after looking at the condition of the place. I believed that the Jack I knew would never endanger animals. I see now, though, I didn't really know him. If you think it's ridiculous that I broke up with you because of tours and something I saw on Reddit, I urge you to think about how subtle abuse might start. I became aware of it thanks to this Reddit thread, which also provided me with the means to securely depart before things worsened. I have also made an appointment to see a therapist. Since I'm lucky to have decent insurance via my job, I want to work through this relationship and concentrate on establishing boundaries and kicking my people-pleasing tendencies, so that I never find myself in a similar circumstance again. We had a good chuckle at the jokes about Emily and myself getting together. Emily is engaged to a great man who listens, cleans, and thinks. According to her, it's common for your genuine soulmate to show up shortly after you break up with a bad ex. I'm happy to have made a new buddy, but I hope that's the case for me. We also have something in common, because Emily is a snake mom. My last update will be this one. I hope you learned something from my experience. Abuse does not begin immediately. Kind words, gifts, and affection are the first steps. Then, gradually, they begin to gauge your tolerance. In particular, moldy plates should not be tolerated by anyone. I found this quote as a last addendum. The courage of others has motivated many survivors to recover. Survivors inspire others to speak up whenever they tell their experience to a friend, give a speech in front of an audience, write a book, or file a lawsuit against abusers or the structures that allow abuse. I really related to this, especially after reading comments from those who had similar experiences or who had come to the realization that they needed to assess their relationships. In the hopes that my story could be helpful to others, I wanted to share it here. How you all helped me, Emily. I haven't posted in a long time. I need to post this for my own mental health, even though I'm not sure whether anyone will read it. I'm hoping this doesn't seem too disorganized. I'll attempt to proceed in sequence. I photographed the damage when we went to Jack's residence. Emily informed me that I may pursue charges if I so desired. She volunteered to help me locate a decent lawyer, but she was unable to represent me because of a conflict of interest. I was first hesitant to file charges. Then I saw a remark that said, "Filing a report may provide a record that might be useful to a future girlfriend in the event that she experiences a similar situation." I wanted to help someone else the way Emily had saved me. I thus made the decision to file charges a few days later. Jack and the landlord were questioned by the police. Jack was evicted by the landlord due to the ruined flat and the presence of the police. He therefore effectively wrecked his own life by destroying my possessions. My supervisor, a physical therapist, was gracious enough to provide me a week off following the events. Although it's a little more costly, I've located a new location. Jack was parked outside the building when I got back to work. I took out my phone right away and began filming in case my lawyer had said that I should have a record of everything. I knew there were a lot of people in the building, so I wanted to enter. I also believed that I could go inside without Jack catching up to me because he was a bit farther away. I was mistaken. When I was just a few paces from the door, he grabbed my hand. He initially stated he wanted to apologize in a calm manner, but I hadn't been returning his calls. While attempting to release my hand, I informed him that we were done and that he should go away. He became enraged at that and drew me in while screaming that I owed him and that I had destroyed his life. When my coworker heard the ruckus, he came out. Jack immediately backed off because he is taller and much bigger than him. Jack left after I told him to stop bothering me. My lawyer was able to obtain a restraining order based on the video from that incident and security footage that showed him waiting in the parking lot for several days when my shift began. He hasn't spoken to me since. I think I'm finally safe because he accepted a plea deal and doesn't know where I've moved. I wanted to wait until everything was settled before posting anything. Now I'm doing a lot better. I've attended a number of therapy sessions. I've gone out with Emily 3 times, and the last time we did so, Jack didn't even mention us. One of my coworkers now walks with me from my car to the door because my workplace has been so supportive. I'm incredibly appreciative of the network of support that has gathered around me. Without their help, including the guidance and inspiration I got here, I couldn't have survived this trying time. Story 3. Therefore, let me start by apologizing for the delay. My father passed away when I was 15 years old. My mom wasn't really close to him at the time, so although it was incredibly painful for me, she wasn't as bothered by it as you might imagine. I enlisted in the military at the age of 17. During my first year away from home, my mother remarried. He and I never really clicked. We simply didn't get along. He would frequently say hurtful things and encourage me to man up when I was unhappy about anything. This led to arguments between us, and I was frequently as much at fault as he was. However, it never became too awful. When I was formally freed after less than 5 years, my parents offered to pay the rent and that they would be happy to have me back home. I assured them that it would only last till I recovered and secured employment. My stepdad asked me what he believed to be a reasonable rent sum after I had been back home for approximately 3 days. We came to an agreement even though I didn't comprehend since it was his place. Since he never mentioned anything to my mother, I assumed he didn't want her to know. I was nasty, so I didn't ask him for anything. All I wanted was to work independently. He has a son from a previous marriage. Although we didn't share interests, I never had any issues with him, so I'd say we got along. They gave him a lot, that's for sure. He enrolled in college immediately following their marriage because I was just about a year older than him. Throughout college and beyond, they covered his living bills, his automobile, and his education. I didn't need or want the support, as I mentioned, but it felt strange that he received all of that assistance and then immediately demanded payment of my rent. However, I'm veering off course. I moved out 3 months later. I soon found a girl I adored, and we started dating. Since it was my first relationship, I was ecstatic the entire time. Like the first time you were in a relationship, but it was always there. I was so afraid to bring her home. Since my mom and I were close, I always assumed that she would treat any female I brought home harshly. I was wrong to be afraid. In the end, they got along really well. In reality, my girlfriend has no relatives. A long tail. That's how my mom and stepdad became for her. I was thrilled that she and my mother got along so well that they occasionally hung out together. I didn't believe I wanted to get closer to her until we were together as kids, but he loved her a lot, so I felt that way. After his father abandoned him and his family, he attended school and found employment. That was incredibly admirable, and he made a good living on his own. A year or so later, I was certain that she was the woman I wanted to wed. She was already very much a member of the family, so when I informed my mom and stepdad, they were both quite thrilled. I got the ring from Mom. She retained the money her father gave her to be married. I figured it would be okay to give her this ring until she could acquire her genuine one because I didn't make a lot of money at work. When I proposed to my girlfriend, she told me it wasn't a filler, and she adored it. I never experienced true happiness in my life. My mother and father promised to contribute to the wedding expenses when we first began organizing it. It meant a lot that they were generous enough to grant me financial assistance for the first time. About 3 months have passed since then. My stepdad phones me now and says I should come over. I headed over there after work, even though it seemed a little intimidating. My mother, stepfather, grandmother, and fiancé were there when I arrived. I immediately spotted her on the couch with tears in her eyes. I went to sit close to her because I assumed someone had died, but I was stopped by my stepdad. He became irate and accused me of cheating on him when we were dating. What was happening? I explained to everyone that, aside from her, I don't even text ladies who aren't connected to me. My fiancé was approached by someone who said we had been dating for more than a year, but she was unaware that I was already seeing someone else. She claimed to have personal information about me in her texts. I couldn't see what was happening in front of me because I was blind. I was astonished, agitated, and furious. I asked her to check my phone from the other side of the room to make sure I hadn't done any of those things. When she and my mother began to cry, I began to cry as well. My stepfather became irate and told me to leave, saying he would call the police if I returned. For several weeks, I made an effort to contact them, but I was unable. Not even voicemails, messages, calls, or any of the popular messaging applications. My stepdad phoned me after those weeks to tell me to cease attempting to contact her. Additionally, he informed me that I would never be permitted to return to his home or be with his family. On the second attempt, I was unable to phone my mother. After a month or so, my mother texted me to express her sadness and unhappiness. I didn't hear from anyone else again after that. They always celebrated the holidays with my stepdad's family because my mom didn't have many relatives. They all stayed away from me as well. When I viewed their Christmas photos on Facebook and noticed that my ex-fiancé was present and appeared content, I felt awful. The only people that spoke to me were my dad's brother and his family. They all appeared suspicious of me, though. My uncle didn't appear to believe me at all. In all honesty, I doubt I could have survived without him. I felt as though my father had fallen in love with me again. Furthermore, I've never been more grateful for someone. I moved away from the East Coast to California around 6 months after everything happened in order to escape it all. I received a call from an area code from my hometown shortly after I relocated. I no longer frequently received this when I answered the phone. My stepbrother was on the other end, so I hung up right away. I thought about it all day, but I didn't respond when he phoned me back. If he phoned me back, I decided to answer the phone. He did just that evening. It was strange, at best. My fiancé had been quite angry for a long time, he informed me. She didn't even begin searching for love for nearly a year. Since the breakup, I had not done anything. My stepdad advised him to ask her out on a date after she did it for a few months, so he did. It appears that something never really clicked, even though the first few dates went well. The idiot told my stepdad that. It wasn't for nothing that I got rid of Up. She is a wonderful girl. You must work things out with her. I was on the verge of fainting when I lost my temper. He persuaded someone to send my fiancé phony messages and create a fake relationship. About a month ago, he told me that, and he was at a loss for what to do. Apparently, he felt so guilty about it that he was unable to conceal it any longer. He informed me and promised to be courteous to my mom and fiancé the following day. In order to give me time to consider everything, he called me first so he would know what to say about me to them. I let him know where I was and requested that they hold off on calling me. We last spoke on Tuesday of last week. I texted him to let him know they could call me tomorrow and that I was available for a conversation. I am clueless about what I will say and what they will say. I'm expecting a lot of things, including tears and a lot of sorry faces. To be completely honest, I'm not sure if I'm prepared to forgive or anything else. My uncle is the only person I've told so far, and I've asked him to keep it private. I apologize for the delay. I needed a vet update, and he or she picked a bad week to go on vacation. All right, I apologize for the wait. Today was a busy day at work, and I have a lot of other thoughts. My stepbrother called me early this morning and filled me in on everything that transpired over the past week. My stepfather didn't say exactly what he told me. It turns out, he went on to say that he was very careful with what he said, so as not to hurt his own case based on what he said, strongly suggesting what he did without saying it directly. His name is Steph, and he is a lot smarter than I am. He did something I wouldn't have thought of. Instead of just strolling over to my mom and fiancé with that, and getting into a yelling match with his dad, he found the girl on my ex's phone. He said it took him a long time to change his mind. He called her and asked her to meet him somewhere public. That's where everything ended. My dad and she met on a dating app, which led me to suspect something between them. That made me even more angry for obvious reasons. It didn't matter to me whether her claim about their relationship was true or not. What does it mean that my stepbrother told her the story and made her cry with what had happened? She told him what happened. Just so you know, she knew what she was doing. Maybe the time in hearing what had happened to me really shook her up, but it doesn't matter to me. I agreed to give her $1,000 in exchange for the call. He gave her the pictures as evidence and told her what to say. The call was made, and that was it. There was even a suggestion to offer her more money for confirmation. My brother asked her if she could tell my mom, and she said yes for free. And that took place yesterday. My stepfather is away on work until Wednesday, so just the four of them were there. She came in and told my mom and ex-boyfriend everything. Brother-in-law said that all three of them started crying almost right away. He finally told them I was in California and would let them know when I was ready to be reached. This was before I texted him. Here's some background information about my mother and ex-fiancé to help you understand some things. This is in no way an excuse for what they did. It's just meant to help people understand. After my dad died, my mom and I couldn't be apart. We looked out for each other. When I turned 16, I began looking for ways to cope with my stress. When I was 16, I told my mom we were going to spend New Year's together, but I ended up with my friends, and we had a night out that got a little out of hand. I got a text from my mom who was home alone all night. After that, things were never the same between us. She texted me about how upset she was because she was by alone, and it made me feel bad. I kept away from bad coping techniques for a long time. She is the type of person who always needs help. She doesn't enjoy being alone. When I thought her and my dad's affection started to diminish, I filled the hole when I grew up and left home. My stepfather filled the vacuum, then my ex. I previously told you that she doesn't actually have a family. It was hard for her to trust because of this, and some pretty awful relationships in the past. Even so, she never spoke nasty things about ex-boyfriends, which I really loved. She had experienced an extremely toxic relationship, but it was an anomaly. I've been told numerous times that I'm cute, especially by girls younger than me, not kids. I never liked the label since it sounds too feminine, but I got over it and learned to enjoy my boyish features and how often I would blush. I'm planning to marry someone slightly older than myself. I've always enjoyed dating older ladies and didn't pay much attention to younger ones. This didn't stop the attention, which made my fiancée furious. She would frequently question me why I didn't marry a younger, more attractive person, or why I wasn't interested in these females. I often told her that she was really attractive and that I didn't care about other females. She was actually far more gorgeous than I was. I apologize for getting off topic. I hope this further idea clarifies why I feel they acted and held the beliefs they did. Again, I don't really understand, and this isn't an excuse for them. After the chat with my brother, he informed me that they both wanted to call today. I assured him that was all right, so I sat and observed. Approximately 3 p.m., I was starting to lose my way. To be honest, I started to suspect that he could have been lying to me. I was frightened. He asked me via SMS whether everything was well. After saying yes, I questioned if they would actually call today. They've been trying for hours, he said. I neglected to unblock them both when I relocated to the West. Why I didn't block him is beyond me, but I'm happy I didn't. After stopping them both, my mother contacted me 5 minutes later. Her first comment was, "You sound different." That's when I nearly hung up. It was at that moment that I could hardly bring myself to answer, "Yeah." She broke down. Saying I didn't feel anything made me feel much more. I'd be telling lies. I was more affected by the misery of it all than by what she said. I told her I didn't have her texts when she inquired. I blocked her phone so she could contact me, but she must have tried texting me for a year. She had the option. I know that's true, even though it seems a little sketchy. And that was okay with her. I informed her that after some time, I would be amenable to re-establishing some sort of relationship. In addition, she informed me that she would immediately file for divorce and leave the house with all she owned before my stepfather returned home. I believe her too. She's never been one to tolerate less, but I don't believe she's a very good mother. When that jerk arrives home and discovers it is vacant, I wish I could be there to witness the expression on his face. Like my mother, my ex apologized through tears when she contacted me next. That night, I felt a bit closer to her. I vowed never to harm her in that way again, and tried to remind her of how many times I had loved her. I'm relieved that she was so unhappy. The fact that we spoke for 30 minutes after more than a year had impressed me. I believed there may be something for us, but I also assured myself it would never happen again. She informed me she still had the ring, which saddened me. I advised her to give it to my mother because it no longer belonged to any of us. I wanted to harm her as well since I knew how awful it made her feel. She wanted to call me or text me. I assured her that everything was fine, but that she shouldn't count on a prompt response. She understood. I essentially offered her the same option that my mother did. However, I did mention that we had very little possibility of dating in the future. She claimed to have received it as well. The last time, I expressed my gratitude to my brother for everything. He was carrying my mom's belongings out of his dad's house. He apologized to me for all that had transpired and promised to share it with his family as well. The eldest member of the family, my stepdad's mother, has wished me a happy birthday and a good Christmas each year for the last year, even though I have nothing to do with them and probably won't speak to them. I'm going to speak with her despite the fact that it appears odd. Either she feels awful or she's old enough to not care. I apologize for rambling on throughout the first week of March. For my uncle's 60th birthday, I take a plane home. I'm going home for the first time since I moved out. I'm planning to schedule a visit with my brother as well. Seeing my mother and ex-boyfriend doesn't bother me, but I've let them know that we both need a lot of time to recover. I'll notify you if anything more comes up. After I get home, perhaps. But that's all I have to say for now. Furthermore, this is essentially my final social media profile. I haven't been on here much during the past year, as you can probably assume. Though I haven't personally seen any, others have discussed incidents similar to mine in the comments. Please let me know if you locate any. As far as I'm aware, I'd be pleased to respond to any inquiries on this matter. Many thanks to everybody. I received a call from someone back home on February 8th. I deleted the majority of my phone numbers from folks I wasn't interacting with some time ago. My stepfather was the one. As soon as I answered the phone, I hung up and blocked the number after saying hello to him. I immediately contacted my brother, mother, and fiancé. Since he is not present, they are all secure. His brother and fiancé are in their houses, while his mother is at a hotel that he is unaware of. They both claim to feel secure. It's better to be safe than sorry. As they say, when my brother returned home this morning, he received a call from him. However, my mother was absent and refused to respond. Brother informed him of what had transpired and advised him to avoid contacting any of them. He contacted me at approximately 3 p.m., although I'm not sure how long he waited. Pacific. About an hour ago, I received a message from a different number saying, "We need to talk." That was him, I believe. I have not responded. That's the latest brief update. Due to my previous remarks, my stepdad's mother contacted. Her number was one I had saved. I was a bit concerned that he could have been attempting to learn something that wasn't true. She is a beautiful woman who showed me kindness even though she didn't have to. She was kind, wished me luck, and apologized on behalf of the family. I thanked her and sent her my best wishes. The fact that he originated from that lady is absurd. Update. I apologize for keeping you all waiting. I recently returned home from a weekend of work. That message from someone who was truly my stepfather crossed my mind. I was so intrigued that I gave him a call. I followed some advice and used a separate app to record the call. I would be lying if I said that the call was helpful. When he inquired how I was, the sound of his voice made my skin crawl. He laughed when I urged him to stop talking. There is nothing wrong with him. Naturally, it was a pointless 3-minute conversation. I did question him about his reasons for not wanting me to date her. He informed me that I wouldn't have gotten along with someone like her, and his words were already angry enough. He has a pretty conventional perspective on relationships. Without deviating too much, that's hilarious, since it demonstrates how little he knew about our bond, or about her in general. My former partner was and still adamantly opposed to gender conventions. She informed me she would never be content to be a stay-at-home wife or mother, even if she had a highly lucrative career. Additionally, she frequently took the initiative in our relationship. There wasn't much more to learn from the discussion than that. I don't comprehend for some reason. I hung up after telling him not to call me again. There won't be anything there. Last weekend, I took a plane back home and attended my uncle's birthday celebration. The family was really kind and apologized for not being more helpful after everything, and we had a great day. I don't think poorly of any of them, and none of them have ever been impolite. After speaking with my brother, I arranged for my mother and ex-wife to join me at his place on Wednesday evening. When I visited there on Wednesday, I received what I had anticipated. Everyone was terribly sorry and crying. To be honest, I found it difficult to maintain my composure. I spoke with my brother and each of them separately. I like that my mom has already requested a divorce, which is a wonderful thing. We had a nice conversation. Although it's obviously stressful, I believe things are improving. Our conversation went well. It was wonderful to meet him face to face. I accepted his apology for all that had transpired. I don't blame him for the effort he put into making things right, but I can see he feels horrible about how things ended. I spent the most of the evening talking with my ex-boyfriend. Our previous phone conversation had been a few weeks prior. Getting caught up was a big part of it. We are obviously different people. After nearly 15 months of being away, we had a more serious conversation about how broken I was and how messed up everything was. She requested if I might accompany her on Thursday, after informing me that she had previously consulted a doctor. She has gone above and beyond anything I could have expected of her in the past several weeks, and for that I am incredibly thankful. I believe that everyone benefited much from the therapy session I attended with her. Her therapist seemed to like having me there as well. I asked her if she wanted to go out on Saturday night after we had been talking for a bit. That is currently the plan. Although I have no idea what will happen, I wanted to let her know that I appreciate the efforts she is doing to make things better. Personally, I would like to spend time with her in a different environment. For now, that's the only news. Things are improving. Since coming home, I haven't seen my stepdad or his family. To everyone who has assisted, thank you. We'll notify you in the event that anything changes. A brief update. The date was a huge success. Together, we had a fantastic evening. We went to an arcade after supper, something we used to do frequently. It was my first date in over a year and a half, and I had a terrific time. We then returned to her home and continued our conversation. Before I return to California this week, we will discuss the next steps. The hardest part will be when we don't live together, but I believe that if we don't constantly live together again, it will help us not look at things too optimistically. We appreciate everyone's assistance.